Okay, dreamer, please.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Happy Lunar New Year to everyone. As you may have already gotten, there was a new currency added last update called Abyss Essence, and you obtain 30 Abyss Essence daily from daily quests after playing Grove Dungeon. So if you are a free-to-play player, you would have gotten at least 300 Abyss Essences so far, which will be enough to fully max out your first new limited trait. Well, unless you use the 30 each day to unlock a whole bunch of limited traits on many heroes, which is highly not advisable. But before we talk about the new limited traits, for the sake of newer players, let's review the Limit Break system very quickly. Limit Break allows you to customize your hero in many ways. You can make them more offensive, more defensive, and make them more resistant against certain statuses. And where these traits are used will depend on the mode and enemies you face. Limit Break is split into 3 categories. Basic traits are really just attack, defense, and HP boost using Soul Essence and Gold. Maxing out the attack basic trait will also give your hero additional speed stat, which is a very important thing for attack leaders in PvP. The general rule is to max out these basic traits regardless of the hero, since they do not cost much and are already unlocked on any hero.
Like and subscribe.
The special traits are those which differentiates heroes. These require Soul Essence and Gold to unlock and max out to level 10. And if you want to change them, you will have to use Topaz. Currently 20 Topaz is needed, but Dev Kagura has mentioned that in March, this cost will be reduced. There are 4 main categories of special traits. The first increases raw stats and can be used in both PvE and PvP. Multiply these values by 10 to know what is the amount provided at max level. With the exception of skill use chance, the rest are more commonly used in PvE to adjust the stats of your DPS or counter heroes to ensure that their damage is consistent. Skill use chance is used for PvP purposes to skew the skill use RNG towards a certain hero. And if you give too many heroes increased skill use chance, then it kind of defeats the purpose. The second category are traits related to statuses and resistances. At level 10, these provide 90% resistance. These are also used commonly in PvP because you would not want your hero to be completely shut down by enemy status effects. The same logic applies in PvE, especially in Raid, Guild Raid, and Guild Dungeon, where the bosses and enemies use a huge variety of statuses to stop you from doing damage. So the usage varies depending on the boss, available immunity heroes, and the possibility to equip resistance rings. The third category are damage boosting traits. These are mainly used on PvE DPSs, and for the best possible damage, it is recommended to change it according to the typing of the boss. The fourth category are damage reducing traits. These traits are useful for tankier PvP units who you wish to retain on the field for a longer duration, and they are also used on PvE support units against Guild Raid bosses and Brawl. However, I will only use traits in this category if there are no other important traits to give my heroes, but I most likely will not use Topaz for these traits either. Moving on to the new limited traits. While I haven't unlocked any yet, I do recommend doing the same, and that is to just hold on for a while, because to change limited traits, you apparently need 100 Topaz. Yes, you heard that right, 100 Topaz. Not sure if this cost will be reduced in March too, but I doubt. So it is very important to make the best decision since you could be potentially locked in. There are 6 main sections for limited traits. 5 of the sections are each targeted at different enemy types and have 8 different traits, as you can see here.
Like and subscribe.
So we will evaluate the 8 traits themselves. The first 2 boost crit damage and lethal damage by 30% at level 10 on a specific enemy type. This is similar to the special trait whereby the usage is determined by the type of enemy faced. These are good options for your PvE DPS because the damage output will significantly increase. However, you must take into consideration that these traits are type specific, and you will not have the luxury to change them unless you have thousands of Topaz. So you probably have to choose the type specific limited trait that will be most beneficial across a variety of enemies. For Guild Dungeon and Guild Raid, choose the ones targeted against offensive and magic enemies, since most enemies and bosses there are offensive and magic typing. For Raid and Castle Rush, the universal one will be best. But take note, Raid and Castle Rush are both auto-clearable and are not exactly competitive modes. So only give your DPS universal enemy-oriented traits if you really have difficulty. Also, I think for Shane, it is wiser to invest in lethal damage boosting traits because she has a self boost in crit damage of 150% already. So based on diminishing returns, that additional 30% crit damage from the limited traits will contribute less to damage output than a 30% increase in lethal damage. You can also use these for PvP, however I don't think they will be as beneficial because crit rate and lethal rate for your PvP heroes may not be high. And since crit and lethal hits are not guaranteed, then investing in crit damage and lethal damage boost doesn't make much sense. So even if you see top players using this, please think twice. Instead, the 70% counter-attack damage and speed attack damage boost traits are a lot more PvP oriented because in PvE, counter and speed attacks are not the main source of damage, maybe only in Brawl. So naturally you will want to possibly invest these traits on your PvP attack leader and counter hero so that they deal a huge ton of damage when they use those respective basic attacks. However, due to the recent speed mechanic changes in Arena which are still being evaluated, I think investing in speed attack damage may not be worth it since you may not even go first. So that's a huge gamble of a trait you have to take. Counter attack damage increase will definitely be an amazing option for counter build heroes like Yonhee and Dylan's. The next 4 are actually the opposites of the first 4 mentioned, whereby they decrease specific damage taken. And having previously experienced how defense is actually more important than offense, I would say that these are very usable on any hero. But the issue with these specific damage reduction traits is that they are dependent on the occurrence of those specific types of attacks from the enemy which you have no control over. You will not know when a crit and lethal hit is coming unless you get hit with fear. You may not be countered, you may not be hit by a speed attack. So these attacks being very RNG based is one issue, especially at higher arena ranks where crit and lethal attacks and damage could be completely mitigated by block. So in the long run, after you progress, will you be okay with spending 100 topaz to change these traits? There's also another issue regarding these limited traits which I mentioned earlier, and that is these traits are all type specific, which means they lock you in to have advantage only against one type. If PvP metas shift and you happen to be locked in on those traits, then they become almost useless against a different enemy. Likewise for PvE, if you face an enemy with a different typing, it becomes an unnecessary trait. I mean, you could always build 5 Velicas over time. Which brings me to talk about the last 3 limited traits, which allow you to deal more damage to enemies who reduce damage taken. So let's first look at which heroes these traits actually target right now for PvP. For physical damage reduction, we have Milia and all universal enemies that she provides for, Rosie, Colt, Rin and all allies in the same row, Tara with Nova, Freya, Reginleif and all magic allies, and Wukong. Okay, that's a lot. For magic damage reduction, we have Judas, Lu Bu, Radgrid and all allies in an offensive team, and Gerard. For overall damage reduction, we have Gyarados, Eve, Rangrid, Rudy, Dylan's and Sage. You can see that these 3 traits alone can let you deal more damage to a much larger pool of heroes in PvP. And many of these heroes are almost common in all meta teams like Judas, Eve and even Rangrid now. Furthermore, some heroes like Radgrid and Rin provide reductions beyond themselves, which means the possibility of nuking enemies is far greater than it looks. Imagine wrecking Judas, Eve's, Rangrids and Radgrids very quickly. Removing them from the battlefield will definitely increase your odds of winning, so these traits do make a significant difference. But what about PvE? Here are some of the bosses and enemies I compiled. For physical damage reduction, we have Demon of Destruction for level 8 Raid, Furious Slayer. Guild dungeon enemies include 910 Bailong, 95 Tsingtao, 820 Ace, 816 Ruri, 811 Daisy, 85 Cathy, 610 Lania, 610 Spike. For magic damage reduction, we have Brilliant Slaughterer. Guild dungeon enemies include 915 Diao Chan, 95 Soy, 92 Phoenix, 820 Kagura, 85 Coco. And for overall damage reduction, we have Stormwing in level 8 Raid. Guild dungeon enemies will include 910 Guan Yu, 95 Feng Yan, 818 Nia, 815 Ace, 810 Jin, 710 Nox. So these are also valid for PvE, and according to my guild leader, in World 8 and 9 alone, about a third of the enemies have physical damage reduction, which means a Velica who has this trait will be doing 1.5 more times more damage than usual already. And similar to the PvP context, I think these last 3 damage boosting traits are more suited for a mode like Guild Dungeon because of the variety of enemy types, and unless you have mode specific DPS copies. I think going for a more broad-based damage increase trait is better than restricting your DPS to only be advantageous against one specific type. But if you have, for example, a Valiger for Guild Dungeon, a Valiger for Guild Raid, and a Valiger for Raid, then you can potentially optimize each Valiger with the type-specific trait instead. That said, do you really have to rush to build these limited traits? I personally do not think so unless you are an extremely competitive PvP player, and even though the new limited traits can make your life a lot easier and better, they do incur very heavy costs, and if you make reckless decisions without considering them, the costs could be pretty harsh. And at this point, even without them, you can still clear and defeat bosses with regular gear upgrades and setup. The traits only serve to give you bigger damage output, which will play a bigger role in terms of competitive PvE like Guild Dungeon, Heavenly Stairs, and Brawl. So I hope this video helped, and if it did, do give it a like and subscribe to my channel. If you are still unsure, feel free to leave your question in the comments. Big shout out to my channel members ZMD Phoenix, Doppelganger, and Reggie Bautista for the support. Stay tuned for more videos. Thank you so much, and see you!